It's time for another round of
Pat GPT.
Pat GPT is brought to you by FOMO Sapiens, the podcast for entrepreneurial thinkers. It's the show where I, Patrick J. McGinnis, share some of my own entrepreneurial thinking in the form of inspiration, practical ideas, and knowledge that you can use at work and in your daily life. And our topic today is overcoming news FOMO. It's election day in America, 2024. And it is an intense day for many people, most people probably, if you're paying attention, not just in the US, but everywhere. This feels big, bigger than, they're all big at this point, right? But it can really cause news addiction driven by FOMO. It's incredible how the news media has monetized our attention. A lot of the headlines and everything online and offline, it's just attention grabbers, clickbait, all this sort of stuff. And it's gotten to the point where it all just feels really big. And if you lived in a cave, you wouldn't even know about this stuff. But if you live in the digital world and you're extremely online, which many people are, then this election can feel really overwhelming. But it's not the only news event. It feels like there's always something, a storm, a murder trial, or some sort of celebrity scandalous thing. There's just always something. Like if you watch the news for, a couple of hours, cable news, the amount of breaking news that's happening is incredible. And by the way, it's kind of interesting because there's a lot of news in the world, but this is breaking news that is oftentimes not even the really important stuff. It's not like, hey, there's a war in this place. It's like, hey, this celebrity did this thing, or this celebrity trial just had this thing go. So the point is just it's very overwhelming. And I remember, there was a time before all this. There was a time when there was no cable news, right? Where people just got the newspaper and they watched the 6 o'clock news on television. And now, thanks to all of these changes, we have scrolling tickers at the bottom of our news channels. That was actually an innovation, I believe, introduced around 9/11. That's the first time we saw that, and it stayed. And so just too much information, and it can become overwhelming. So that's what I want to talk about, because I have personally been struggling with this forever, ever since the news got crazy, but especially now with election day here. It's a lot for me. And so I've been thinking about how I can manage my own FOMO, well-being, and everything else. So we're going to get to that right after the break.
FOMO.
All right, everybody, we're talking about news FOMO. I've got 5 tips on how to manage your news FOMO. The first one is this: understand the game. I mentioned this a little bit earlier. This whole thing is about media companies and other people monetizing your attention. Now, I'm not here to rail against media companies because they do a service, right? It is important for them to put information out in a compelling way that makes us want to pay attention. So that at a base level is totally fine. But at the same time, the way it's packaged with these headlines, breaking news, ticker, all this sort of stuff, it really grabs our attention and monopolizes it. And then, ads are sold and subscriptions are sold and stuff like that. So that's the game. And if you are going to be a participant in that game and you know how it works, then you can decide how you want to engage or not. Right. And so what I've been feeling a lot lately is I have certain websites I like to go to for news, and they're very addictive because they're always adding new stories. And it's kind of like, the way Drudge Report does. If you ever go to Drudge, I love Drudge Report. I'm addicted to Drudge Report. I don't even know why. Half the stuff is trash, but there's something about it. And so I just try not to go there as much. And there are other sites like that as well. That's really important, because when you know that Drudge Report is sort of like putting these ridiculous stories to get you to react, then you can say to yourself, do I really want to have those feelings right now? I'm going to take a little break. Just understanding how media works and how they monetize you is the first step in the long battle for your sanity. Number 2, set boundaries. So, for example, one thing that I have done, there's this other website that I'm addicted to called politicalwire.com. Don't go there if you've never been. Don't go. It's very addictive. And I had a rule for a long time, which is I could only check that website on my desktop. So if I was on my mobile, I wouldn't look at it. It was not allowed because, you're just waiting in line somewhere, or you're on the subway, or you're doing whatever you do, walking around. And that's a lot of time. Like, I'm much more mobile than I am on my desktop. And so it was just a really easy way for me to stop checking that. Same with Twitter. I took that off my phone years ago. So I don't have that app. And therefore, if I want to check it, I do it on my desktop, which always makes me feel bad because Twitter is literally a swamp now. But little rules like that to create routines that limit your time, very helpful. And especially when it comes to mobile devices, because you just don't want to be that person, right, that's stuck to their mobile. You can also just take that mobile and put it away. But that's really important. Number 3, be mindful about what your sources are. I just mentioned 2 sources, Drudge Report and Political Wire, which to me, Drudge Report, I don't know where it skews at this point, but I assume that's kind of a right kind of skew. Political Wire feels left to me. Probably should get rid of both of them, and try to find places that feel less partisan. Now, that's a whole other question these days, because no matter who you are, you're going to feel that the thing that doesn't say what you want is partisan. But oftentimes international news sources like the BBC or if you can look at Le Monde or something, they'll bring different perspectives. It's really important to do that. And at the same time, like, one thing that I definitely advise people from sort of doing is that if you read a story one time, you don't need to read it 16 times. And I think we have a temptation these days. It's like, well, I read the New York Times version. I'm going to read the Washington Post version. I'm going to read the Fox version, so on and so forth. Just read the story once. That'll just give you more time for the rest of your life. Number 4, stay off social media as much as possible. Or more fair, just limit your social media use. Be mindful of it. Track it. I think especially when it comes to news, Twitter is just, half the stuff isn't even real at this point. So it's bad. And I have friends who've been doom scrolling. When a big international story hits, or national story, situation in the Middle East, for example, you have everybody's on Twitter looking for things that confirm their bias, most of which aren't even true, and then sending them around to everybody. It is crazy. Not good for anybody. Really, really unhealthy. And also, it's probably not true. So, do you really want to be filling your news stomach full of junk food? Absolutely not. So think about how to mindfully disengage from different apps. Could be TikTok. TikTok, again, who's fact-checking those people? Right? Could be Instagram. It's really shocking. And so you're supposed to be going you go to TikTok, you're going to Instagram thinking you're getting entertained, and you're just getting news. So being mindful about how you're consuming news and where you're doing it is really helpful. Same with podcasts. We think of these shows as entertainment, but a lot of them are news shows wrapped around some entertainment kind of thing. So again, just being careful. How much times do you have to hear the same story, the same analysis of the same thing? Not a lot. And finally, this feeds right into my last point, quality over quantity. Pick in-depth analysis, challenge yourself, but try to stay away from reading the same headlines a million times, or just going deep on a story to the point where it's just ad nauseum, because there's no value to that, really. You just give yourself anxiety, and nobody wants that. All right, those are my tips. If you have tips or thoughts, please send them my way. You can find me at letsconnect@patrickmcginnis.com, at PJ McGinnis on Twitter. It's not a nice place anymore. I shouldn't even say my handle, but it is what it is. That's my handle. And at Instagram at Patrick J. McGinnis. All right, everybody. Good luck with the news. I will see you on Thursday with another episode of FOMO Sapiens. Until then, take care of yourselves. FOMO Sapiens. FOMO. FOMO Sapiens is recorded in New York City. Theme music is by Mike McGinnis, and editing and post-production is by Josh Elstro. If you like today's show, please be sure to rate it and recommend it to your friends. And as always, you can find me at FOMOSapiens.com and at PatrickMcGinnis.com. To advertise on FOMO Sapiens, reach out to contact@FOMOSapiens.com.